I have here the Pika lid, a patented lid for backpacking pots that has an insane amount of features and usefulness. I'm really excited for this lid because I've been dreaming about it and thinking about it for years, and it's finally come to fruition after years of development as I co-designed it with Braxton from Pika Outdoors. Today, I'm gonna go over everything that makes this lid great, talk about some frequently asked questions, and then go over some tips and tricks so you can get the most out of this lid if you've been one of the lucky ones who've been able to pick one up before it ran out of stock. I'll have a link in the video description where you can go pick one up. It's going to be a geo-located link, so if you're in a country and we have a retailer there, that's where it's going to point you. Let's start by talking about compatibility, because this lid isn't going to work with every single pot out there. I did a survey on my YouTube channel, and most of you out there are using the Toke 750 milliliter pot. So that's the pot that we targeted when we were designing the lid. So it'll fit on pretty much any Toke 750 milliliter pot. It just snaps right on, and then you have a lid that's secure and locked onto your pot. The key for pot sizing is that it basically has to be a pot that's just a little bit wider than a fuel canister. So a lot of these smaller pots are made to fit a fuel canister inside of them, and that's what we kind of designed the lid around. The lid will also work with the Toke 650 milliliter pot, whether you have handles on it or not, and then a bunch of other pots that are very similar and probably made in the same factory as the Toke 750. If you go to the Pika Outdoors website, there's a full compatibility list of which pots it works on. We're gonna be updating that as we get more pots tested. But something to keep in mind is that it's not compatible with the Toke's 550 milliliter pot just because of how small the pot is. So when you put this pot on a really powerful stove that's running at max, then the flames kind of go up the side of the pot and end up melting the lid. So that's what happened right here with the 550 that I have. So for that reason, it's not listed as fully compatible. But personally, I've been using it with the 550 a whole bunch. I just make sure that I'm not blasting the stove and that I'm using it at about half power or less. I know a lot of you are wondering about whether the lid is compatible with the petrol pot. We'll get into that with the frequently asked questions. I want to go over all of the features of this lid because it goes well beyond just being able to snap onto a pot. There's a lot of things that went into this lid, a lot of considerations. Other than being able to snap onto a pot, the other major thing I wanted the lid to be able to do is to be able to hold a fuel canister. So with this lid, you can snap a fuel canister onto the lid and then still snap the lid onto the pot. I love this because it makes it so that the fuel canister isn't rattling around inside of the pot. It also prevents your pot from getting rust rings if your fuel canister gets put inside the pot and the pot has a little bit of water left inside of it. The other thing we added is a spot to store your lighter. So if you use a mini Bic lighter, you can snap it onto the lid before you snap on your fuel canister, and then it holds it all together in this really nice contained package. Because of how contained everything is and the way we designed the lid to sit slightly above the lip of the pot, you're able to actually fit bigger stoves than you'd be able to in a pot with the traditional lid that comes with it. So if you try to fit the Pocket Rocket Deluxe or the Soda Windmaster stove, which are two of the more popular larger stoves, into a Toke 750 milliliter pot with a fuel canister and a lighter, the lid that comes with the pot, the titanium one, is going to sit slightly above, and you're not going to be able to get it to sit firmly. But with our lid, everything sits really nicely and stays contained and really does prevent rattling quite a bit. There's also a couple of features on the top of the lid. There's some strainer holes on the one side here, and then a bigger hole for pouring water out if you decide to boil water with the lid on top of the pot. This opening is also designed to be the right size in order to sip water if you like using your pot as a mug. We also added a little gap, so if you want to use hot lips on the pot in order to keep yourself from burning your lips on the pot, then you can add that in there as well. One of my favorite features, especially when I'm traveling down to the States and buying freeze-dried meals down there, is the unit conversion chart on the top of the lid here. So it has unit conversion for cups to ounces to milliliters. So if you have a freeze-dried meal that is giving you measurements in cups, but then your pot only has ounces or milliliters, then you can still figure out how much water to put into the pot in order to boil it, in order to get your meal properly rehydrated and you don't end up with something that's either too dry or too soupy. The final feature on top of the lid has to do with all these ridges, and it's something that, based on the initial feedback we got, is people's favorite feature with this lid. And it's the fact that you can take basically any titanium long-handled spoon, not all of them, but most of them, and you can slide it into the top of the lid and then use your spoon as a handle in order to pour water out of the pot. This is actually really cool because it means that you don't need to bring a pot with handles. You can save a little bit of weight that way. I also really like it because a lot of the time the handles of the pot get really hot when you're boiling water, and this way you're not burning yourself. You just slide the spoon in and you're good to go. If you don't want to use the spoon as a handle because you rather use the handles on the pot or a pot gripper, which is my personal favorite to grab the pot and pour water out, it has little ridges around the outside, so it just rests right on top of the pot nicely, stays on there no problem even when water starts to boil. And then you can use the lighter clips in order to grab the lid and take it off once the water starts to boil. Let's jump into some frequently asked questions before going over the tips and tricks. We'll start off right away with the petrol pot and whether the lid is compatible with the smaller petrol pot. I think it's a G1. And the answer is yes. It's a very tight fit once you get it on there, but it does work with it, which means that you can leave the lid and the handle that comes with it at home. And then by using the lid with the petrol pot, you get all the benefits of being able to nest the canister and your lighter in the lid so that they're not rattling around and creating rust rings. Because right now in my petrol pot, I have a bunch of rust at the bottom there because I've just been storing my canister just sitting in there like that. And all my pots where I do that, I started getting rust rings in the bottom. With how tight the lid was on the petrol pot, the other question that we're running into is why is it so hard to get the lid on and off the pot? And a lot of this has to do with very slight variations in different versions of Toaks pots. So on this pot right here, this is an older Toaks pot, and the way the fold on the lip of the pot is made is a little bit thicker than the newer pots. And because of that, it makes it a little bit harder to get the lid on and off. If you put the lid on and it's hard to twist the pot, like it doesn't just spin freely, then that means that it's probably a little bit tight. It will loosen up over time as it kind of stretches and the material adjusts, but right away it's going to be a little bit hard. And I do have some tips and tricks for that, but I just want to mention that that's kind of normal and something that you're going to encounter. If you have one of the newer Toaks pots, the lid is going to spin freely really easily, especially if you have the Toaks 750 without handles. The lid just fits really nicely on there. The other question we get is, will my stove fit inside the pot with the lid and a canister? And it's really hard to answer that question because there's so many different stoves out there. I've been using the BRS 3000 stove with a pot gripper inside the 550 milliliter pot, and everything fits inside there really nicely. Inside the 750, you can fit some of the bigger stoves like the Pocket Rocket Deluxe and the Windmaster. With the 650 pot, it's a little bit more hit and miss. You're gonna have to just kind of experiment, see for yourself. And worst case scenario, use a BRS, great little stove, and it's gonna fit with basically any pot out there. The other thing we've ran into is a couple people have melted their lids, but that's when using their really big, powerful stoves on full blast with a smaller pot. So what I do is I just make sure that I'm never blasting the stove. You're gonna save fuel that way. It's gonna be a lot more efficient to use your stove at about half power than full power, and you're not gonna melt your lid. Even if you do, it's still gonna work. Like this lid still works on the 550 milliliter pot, even though the edge has been melted. All right, let's jump into some tips and tricks now, starting with if you do have a lid that's a little bit tight on your pot, a good way to get it off easily is to kind of squeeze the pot a little bit right where the clips are. So you have these little tabs on the side that allow you to kind of help pull up on the side of the lid in order to get it off the pot. So if you kind of squeeze right at those points and then kind of twist, the lid comes off pretty easily. And then same with getting it back on. If you give it a little twist as you're doing it, it just goes on a little bit more easily. Some people have the same problem with their fuel canister, getting it on and off. Again, if you just use these tabs on the side to kind of pull up on one side and then kind of pull up on the other side, it comes off pretty easily. I've done this hundreds of times, and as you do it more and more, it gets easier and easier. It just might be something that right away seems a little bit more difficult than just kind of being able to just go plop and it coming right off. Getting the lighter out easily is something that we actually worked on pretty considerably because I have arthritis in my hands. It just makes it really hard to grip a lighter and pull it out of these clips because they're made to be strong and hold the lighter in. So what we did was we added ramps on either side of the lighter. So you just push the lighter up the ramp. I recommend from the side that produces the flame, and you can easily just pull it off the lid. Those are all my tips and tricks. My personal favorite setups are the lid with the 550 milliliter pot. Again, don't use your stove on full burner with the 550 milliliter pot. With a BRS 3000 stove, as well as the Sulik 46 mini pot gripper, or I use it with the 750 milliliter pot with no handles. Again, because a lot of the time I'm just using my spoon as a handle, and then with the Pocket Rocket Deluxe stove. These combinations I think are some of the best combinations out there. And yeah, really excited for this. Excited to hear what you guys think of it. Get it into your hands, get more use out of it. We're probably going to be making a version 2 sometime in 2026. And that's another thing that we're really excited about. So if you have any feedback, leave reviews, send me emails, comment on this video, And yeah, we're going to keep making this lid as best we can. And you probably won't see it from anyone else because, like I said, it's patented.